So by 23 or 24 years old, you've already spent time with the old Turners. You've spent time learning martial arts. You've wrestled. You've been through the military. Went to Korea. You were able to learn from high level trainers over there. You come back and you're thrown right into teaching almost immediately.
Yes, that's true. I started teaching judo in the physical education department at the University of Iowa when I was still an undergraduate in around 1970. Some great athletes signed up. Chris Campbell, for instance, was one of them. He won a bronze medal in the '92 Summer Olympics in Barcelona and a gold medal at the '81 World Wrestling Championships and a silver medal in 1990, I think it was. I felt incompetent, so I sponsored a teacher from the Korea Judo College to come over and become our head instructor. And not long after, I started teaching hatha yoga and weight training. Weightlifting was part of the Turner tradition I practiced in my youth and in the military, but I still felt unprepared. So I drove out to Gold's in the summer of around '75. There were still old-time hand balancers hanging around Venice Beach, and I also learned from them. Gold's Gym was ground zero back then for world-class bodybuilders. Dave Draper and Franco Colombo were particularly friendly and welcoming. I eventually invited Franco to present at Northern Illinois University when I was teaching weight training there in the 1980s. The gym was packed. One day at Gold's, I saw Franco using inversion boots, and he told me the inventor, Dr. Robert Martin, had a clinic in nearby Pasadena, so I went over and introduced myself. Dr. Martin was around 20 years my senior, and he grew up in Pella, Iowa, not far from my hometown, Davenport. We both trained with the German Turners in our youth, and he was later a vaudeville gymnast. Dr. Martin eventually became a chiropractor, an osteopath, and a medical doctor. He was a gifted teacher with an uncanny understanding of how to train in harmony with nature. He had been practicing since his youth and writing about it in fitness magazines for well over a decade when I met him.
The child is very close to nature, and you will see children rather than sitting in chairs, they'll go over the back of the chair and hang upside down, you might say. You'll find children up to 5 years of age that will be sleeping in the knee-chest position. These all have physiological effects that are very beneficial to the child.
I was already using a primitive inversion table called the Physicare machine out of Bradenton, Florida, in my U of Iowa yoga classes in the early '70s, so I was comfortable with inverted postures. But Dr. Martin rocked my world when he gave me a copy of his new book, Cum Gravity, Living with Gravity. I read it over and over back then and still return to it often. It explains that posture is a fluid construct and means simply any position in which the body resides. There are 6 basic postural categories. Upright, flexed, and horizontal are common. Most people spend all their lives standing, sitting, or lying down. Inversion, extension, and brachiation are uncommon. Brachiation means hanging from the limbs. Extension is leaning backward. Inversion means turning head downward. If we only employ the common postures all our lives, Dr. Martin taught me, gravity is a relentless and unidirectional force that deforms us over time. We get shorter, slouch, our internal organs fall forward and downward, and even the brain settles in the cavity of the skull. Dr. Martin became my mentor, and he taught me his training theories and methods for around 20 years until he passed away. I think of him often and still miss him dearly today. Inversion was widely condemned by the medical and scientific community back then. They really beat Dr. Martin up and unfairly castigated his work. Doctors, physical therapists, and exercise scientists almost unanimously insisted his training methods would cause strokes and lead to vision impairments along with numerous other injuries. Ironically, it is true that gravity can injure or kill. In fact, the Romans often crucified their victims upside down. Gravity is like a knife. The surgeon uses it to heal, and the criminal uses it to kill. It all depends on how it is applied. I eventually invited Dr. Martin to speak at Northern Illinois University when I was teaching there in the 1980s. My department chair and some of the other faculty sided with the majority and were unhappy about it. Dr. Martin believed that properly applied inverted and brachiated postures simply employ the timeless and valuable principles he learned as a boy studying the old German gymnastics traditions and ancient medical practices. Even Hippocrates used inverted therapy. It was called succussion. Yogis inverted from trees, and it was practiced by many physical cultures when Dr. Martin was a young man. Even the famous bodybuilder John Grimmick used inverted training in the mid-1940s when I was born. In the 1970s, Dr. Martin started manufacturing the equipment he first used in his medical practice so all people could employ it in their daily lives. The scientific community immediately attacked him, and some people started to use the boots and tables carelessly, and of course they got injured. Dr. Martin began getting sued. His insurance rates went sky high and the lawsuits piled up. In 1985, his company was one of the fastest growing small businesses in the nation. A few years later, his company went bankrupt. Dr. Martin eventually retired, retreated from the world, and spent his last years feeling as if his life's work was a failure. Fortunately, Roger Teeter also began creating inversion equipment in the early 1980s and fought through the opposition until the public and the scientific community began to understand the importance of postural exchange. Over the years, I've worked with Roger and his team to keep Dr. Martin's work alive. When I was with the Army Physical Fitness School at Fort Benning in the late 1990s, Roger, an Army veteran, came down and helped introduce soldiers to inverted physical readiness training. The Army Physical Fitness School eventually included it in the Master Fitness Trainer course for a while, and the Ranger community quickly understood its value and began to use it. But once again, influential fitness people, like our physical therapists at the fitness school, didn't believe that inversion was safe or useful. The effort began to fade when I left in 2001. A few years ago, the FDA finally approved inversion tables for a variety of medical conditions. We understand it much better now, but we sure missed a great opportunity to help soldiers back in the 1990s. Fortunately, inverted training spread into the special operations community, including Navy SEALs in the late 1990s, and Roger Teeter's efforts have now reached millions of people through television, internet, and other media. Today, scattered units like the 82nd Airborne are exploring inverted decompression and mobilization with inversion boots. I studied, practiced, and applied Dr. Martin's theories over decades at the University of Iowa, Northern Illinois University, Upper Iowa University, Fort Benning, and Grayson University. Some of our students, coaches, and faculty at Grayson produced short inversion video clips to evaluate our mistakes and improve their skills. A few are posted on YouTube channel Via Militaris. I learned quite a bit in Venice and with Dr. Martin in Pasadena during those summers that helped prepare me to leave the University of Iowa and teach physical education full-time at Northern Illinois University beginning in 1979.